My mother is sick, very, very sick, and I thought I would take this moment in time to teach you one of the most powerful stress reduction tools that I teach to my clients that very few people talk about and nobody teaches in the way that I do. If you're seeing this, my guess is that you're dealing with something stressful in your life, be it work or personal, so be sure to share this with yourself or mark it as favorites so you can come back to it later and have help walking through this model, because this is going to be an intermediate version. Typically with even my private coaching clients, this is one of the tools they tell me over and over and over is one of the most powerful, and even for them we typically only do beginner level, but I really wanted to use this as a chance to teach you some of these complex ideas and frankly to help support myself in being reminded how powerful this tool is. This is the circle of control model, and it is a way to regain a sense of control when you feel like life is happening to you. It is a way to look at all the things, all the stories that you're telling yourself, and categorize it into the stuff you actually can control, the stuff that you can't, and make a decision about where you want to focus your time and your energy. If you only take one thing away from this video, let it be this. If you only focus on immovable things, you will always feel stuck. I want you to think of two circles. The large one is literally everything that impacts your life, whether it is history, massive things like systemic racism, to micro things like how many pairs of shoes you own. Things outside here like the weather in Guam, if you have zero ties to Guam, right? It exists, but unless you have ties to Guam, we don't care. So this is everything that impacts us, whether we control it or not. The center circle is the subset of those things that we actually do have direct control over. This outer ring of no control can be divided into two separate pieces. Things you can influence, so potentially able to move, and the things that are absolutely immovable. When I teach this to my clients, I teach it with distinct hard lines. And if you are a beginner at this, then it's probably worth it to start with these distinct hard lines. But the intermediate version is that this is really more of a gradient, which I can't accomplish with dry erase markers, but more of a gradient moving out until things are completely immovable, but some things we do have more direct influence over than others. So we're just going to use a dotted line to remind ourselves that this is really more of a gradient, going from things we have a lot of influence over to things that we can barely influence at all. And if you were paying attention, you'll notice I said potential influence. So this is another piece that at the beginner level, we just talk about influence. The next level is recognizing that this is potential influence, right? We can think that we are able to influence things, and we will do behaviors assuming that we can influence someone. Maybe it's our manager at work, and we think that we'll be able to influence what they are assigning us. If we do everything in our power to try and influence our manager to stop over-assigning us work, eventually we have to say, okay, I have very little to absolutely no influence over this person. Things we actually can control are our behaviors, our words, and who we choose to surround ourselves with. In a lot of cases, not just the words that we choose, but the tone, how we deliver those words. We can control how we spend our resources. We can control where we live. As we get older and have more resources, etc., this circle of control does increase, right? If you're 5, you are not even able to influence where your parents choose to live, right? So this does increase, but the only things in your control are you. Circle of influence or potential influence is where I see a lot of people getting themselves into trouble, particularly around influencing other people. People are not in your control. We get confused because there are influencing skills that we can control, learning about and executing, but at the end of the day, you do not control what other people do. You do not control what other people think of you, what they choose to say to you, what they do with your boundaries. You can only influence those things. You can communicate boundaries and hope that you can influence, right? You can communicate boundaries and hope you can influence whether or not other people will respect them. But at the end of the day, you can't control other people. All you can do is do your best at doing the behaviors of influencing and pay attention to the realities of whether or not you can actually influence them and say, hey, at some point, maybe I just have no influence over this person, this thing. You got to pay attention to the data, and that is why it's potential influence. What you can often control, though, is whether or not you continue to give those people access to you in the short or at very least the long term. And then there are some things that are completely immovable or so far past where we can influence them that they might as well be counted as immovable, right? So the weather is the classic example, but also the past, your immediate emotional response to things, right? We can't control, we have no control. We cannot control what our immediate emotional response is. We can influence how long we stay there, by doing things that we control, and we can influence the future, but the past, your immediate emotional response, people that are completely outside of your influence, like my guess is very few people watching this have any influence over Beyonce, right? For you, in your life, Beyonce is immovable. In your job, you can control whether you communicate your boundaries, how hard you enforce them, the time and energy you put into individual projects, your type of self-care, and whether you stay in that job at all. You might be able to influence the amount and type of work that you're being given, when and how your manager talks to you, and whether or not someone else will hire you. But you cannot move the job market, the cost of living, or the fact that most jobs are achieved through networking. So things that are completely immovable, I can't control the training that the medical staff there received or who is employed there. I can't control what might be going on in their personal life, or even that happened that particular day. I cannot have any impact on my mother's past medical history. I have literally no impact on the sorts of bias and discrimination that exist in the medical community that currently are and have for a few decades, many decades, impacted her health. I could potentially influence her healing process by helping her to reduce stress, making her, potentially feel more comfortable. I could even potentially influence the nurses' staff help by buying them pizza. What I can control are the things that I bring to my mom. I know her eyes are dry and I can bring her eye drops. I can control when I choose to fly up there, how long. I can control my schedule because I am a small business owner, and I only take on clients that I'm really, really excited to work with, and I have resources that it's not going to be devastating that I am taking a pause on new clients. Whether you were sent this video by the algorithm or someone who cares about you, I am so sorry you're going through whatever you are, and I hope that this model brings you comfort too.